I'll kill somebody.
Okay. I'm here to shout the world. I'm ready. So there's a man in this world. They call me the Shockmaster.
I'm going to let you see my puppies! Oh, Lord.
Dude, Mike, get up! Get up!
Still there? They're still after us?
We gotta go!
And starting this moment from now, from this moment on,
Take me along. Where do we go? Where do we go?
East, Mike. Japan is east.
East?
East!
Cole today, Cole as confident as they come.
Cole has what's listed on NXT's injury report as questionable coming out of left.
Are you fucking kidding me? Adam Cole, Matt Riddle, you're gonna sleep on me? I can leave. I can go home and watch this by myself.
I'm sorry, I was having the craziest dream, man. We were running through the woods from bad gimmicks, and we ended up in Japan, and we talked to the Melts.
Meltzer?
That's right, Meltzer himself. And he gave me the system. The system? That's right, the system. The perfect 10-star rating system.
The system?
The system.
And welcome to Smark Thinking Match Reviews, where we objectively, mathematically, and scientifically attempt to give star ratings in search of the perfect wrestling match.
We haven't found one yet.
But as you've just seen, we've gone to Japan and entered the hallowed temple that is the Tokyo Dome, and we've been handed down the perfect inerrant rating system by who we consider to be the most important figure in professional wrestling, our kayfabe father, Dave Meltzer.
Wasn't that a dream?
That doesn't matter, because things don't always have to make sense in professional wrestling, but it sure is nice when we don't have to turn up our powers of disbelief and we fall into a state of pure Mark Nirvana. Now that being said, we've gone down the rabbit hole that is professional wrestling star rating systems, and we've discovered this.
It's a shit show. None of it really makes any sense when it comes to rating matches.
What's great for me about the star ratings, and some people say, oh, they're kind of controversial, and you say you don't really put that much thought into it, but I love it.
I put thought into it, but I don't. I mean, I consider my reporting to be a million times more important than my star rating.
Right.
So we've developed what we think is a mostly objective system for rating wrestling matches, including criteria that must be fulfilled.
And to be more elaborate, we've evaluated the very meticulous process that we've liked to dub
Steiner.
And this has, for us, become the everlasting quest in developing what we'd like to say is the most objective match rating system in wrestling today.
Now, that being said, and art still being subjective, these are ultimately just two people's thoughts and opinions.
Yeah, two people's thoughts and opinions that were handed down greatness by the Melts himself. But I digress or whatever.
Right, so don't get mad as we break down for you the 10 stars that make up what we think is the perfect wrestling match. The first thing we'll be looking at in a match is the in-ring psychology. This is, at its core, the thing that makes us believe in wrestling. Essentially, psychology is the way wrestlers manipulate the crowd into suspending their disbelief. The way you walk and talk, sneer and smile, and carry yourself in and out of the ring helps us all to forget the fact that we're not just watching a show. To quote one of the masters of in-ring psychology, Jake the Snake Roberts, you have to make them believe the ballet is real.
Disclaimer.
Now, one could argue, and many will, that each of these categories could fall under just this one. Now, our first response to that is...
Fuck you!
Second, we believe that each of these categories can be separated and that each are a crucial component when creating a perfect wrestling match.
This one's pretty self-explanatory. How good does the in-ring action look? From rest holds to 450 splashes and everything in between. We're looking for fluidity and realism in this one. Now, we're not even looking for any particular type of moves here, but anything that happens needs to be smooth and fluid. Botches and miscues will greatly affect this score.
The sell, for the uneducated, is another extremely important aspect in helping us suspend our disbelief when watching wrestling. Simply put, the sell is how a wrestler tells us that he's hurt, within the confines of the match, of course, making sure that the moves he's receiving from his opponent looks like they're really and truly hurt. You get body slammed, you grab at your back, like it's about to snap. You land on your knee, and the rest of the match you can barely walk. The sell is pivotal to making a match look real. Things like no-selling and overselling are what's going to affect this score. However, exceptions will be made if either the no-sell or the oversell is part of the wrestler's developed character.
This one's fairly easy to understand as well. Pacing refers to the tempo of the match. Is it moving too slow, too fast? Is it dragging on and on and on? Is there 1,000 rest holds that would make Dean Malenko and James E. Cornette create a love child that knows 2,000 rest holds? Or is it a perfectly timed contest with just the right amount of explosive action, crowd work, and dips in the action that creates a well-executed dance and an excellent contest?
This category, to put simply, refers to any major moments in the match. Hogan slams entree, Taker throws Mankind from the top of the cell, Hardy backflips off the cage, Michael tells Flair he loves him, and then proceeds to superkick his face back to the territory days. Any moments that help to tell the physical story of the match and gives us the big moments and drama that we all love and crave. Really, dude? That's all you got?
Look, I'm bored. I want to rate some matches. I want to move on. I want to get to the cream of the crop.
Jesus, Mike. Be patient. Look, sorry, folks. We've been grinding away at this pretty hard, but that doesn't give Mike an excuse to act like a dick.
Fine. The finish is, like I said, the ending of the match. It includes not only things like what move was used to end it, but was it a logical ending in relation to the rest of the match? And probably the most important aspect is, of course, who wins. Now, we understand this is a matter of booking, and it isn't always in the hands of the wrestlers. Nonetheless, this still plays into the overall quality of the match. Better?
This one is simply as its name suggests. How long was the match, and did it warrant however much time it used? Probably, but that's kind of our gimmick. Anyway, what makes a proper match length is full and proper use of time. We've gotten some pushback that this category could be the same as our pacing category, but we believe that first, that is,
fuck you!
Second, we think that a match can be properly paced but go way too short, or admittedly less often, too long.
This describes the overall importance and magnitude of the match itself. This one can be helped with the passage of time, but it could be anything that just helps us remember it. Anything from the opening match of a promotion to the main event of a WrestleMania. Anything that will etch the match into the annals of time.
You said anal.
Fuck you.
Because there's so many styles of wrestling, we believe it's important to mix it up. In any given match, you should be able to see any combination of mat wrestling, high flying, or brawling, and anything else that can mix up the action. And last but most certainly not least is the Melt Star. This category is lovingly named after our kayfabe father, king of all wrestling reviews, and the aforementioned most important person in pro wrestling history, David Allen Meltzer. This star is lovingly named after Papa Dave, not only because of his contribution to wrestling, but because ultimately his mindset is that the most important thing at the end of the day is that we're all entertained. Which is all this star is. Was the match entertaining?
This is also somewhat of a rib to Pops, because as we previously alluded to, it seems to be what he and others base their star ratings around.
Dude, don't talk about Dad like that.
Just saying.
And that's essentially how we rate our matches. So make sure you tell us in the comments below what you think. Smash that like and subscribe button. And I think now that that's out of the way, it's about time we rate some matches.
About damn time.
So the first match we're going to take a look at here is Kofi Kingston versus Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania 35 at the time of this taping this year.
At first, I wasn't sold on the psychology of this match, but to be honest, the psychology is kind of brilliant here, and it achieves its very simple yet effective goal. For what it was, you could argue the match flow was intentionally comparable to Kofi's tenure in WWE. Throughout Kofi's career, he's been stuck with a less than favorable gimmick, finally busting out into his own in the tag team scene, just for it to lock him into that mid-card tag team tier. So comparable to his match with Daniel Bryan, he's always down fighting back, with counters that ultimately fail, or he's taking devastating knees and kicks to the back or abdomen. If you look at this from this perspective, his eventual title win at the end of the match is the period at the end of this long story, an 11-year-long story that's expressed eloquently within a 23-minute match.
Now one could argue, and I did, that the flaw in the psychology is this. It's hard to buy Kofi as the underdog against Bryan. First of all, at this point in the game, we're pretty much conditioned that Bryan, heel or face, is always the underdog. Second, aesthetically, Kofi has an immediate size and athleticism advantage over Bryan. Now, Daniel is clearly the better mat technician, and that is apparent in the match, but it doesn't ever really hit hard enough to make Kofi the convincing underdog. And even with former Swamp cult enthusiast Rowan by his side, Kofi still has the New Day with him, so he has the numbers advantage. At the end of the day, though, the ultimate story of the match was told very well, so I'll concede the full star instead of giving it the half I originally wanted to give it.
I honestly can't complain about the wrestling here. It starts out with some decent chain wrestling and counters, breaks out into your heel powder to the outside, but from this point on, for me, it really just broke down into strikes, counters, and submissions. Yes, there was more to it, but the main focus here was Kofi trying to establish power after these consecutive knee strikes or the label locks. For what it's worth, we felt like more could have been done here, and we'll touch on this a little bit more once we get into variety.
What's really going to leave this at only a half star is simple. It's just not that fluid. The moves, a lot from Kofi's end, just aren't delivered with the same ferocity that one would expect from someone trying to reach out and grab that brass ring for the first time in their long and tribulation-filled career. Although maybe it is what you'd expect from a pancake-throwing unicorn man beloved by children everywhere. No shade at Kofi here, but the moves here just don't hit the same way old Daniel Bryan does. Kofi is great, Bryan is great, but the two together just didn't produce the in-ring chemistry one would hope for in a WrestleMania World title match.
I can't really complain about the selling here. There's nothing that really stands out, other than maybe an arguable no-sell from Daniel Bryan after he receives an SOS, but other than that, it didn't really bother me too much, and there was a purpose as Bryan counters it once again into the label lock. We think it's safe to give this one a full star. I'm gonna have to flat out say that we aren't huge fans of the pacing in this match, but it definitely doesn't take anything major away. The match is centered around being beat down and metaphorically being told you can't do it. You can't achieve this 11-year goal. It's argued that it serves its purpose, however I'd like to point out that it feels like it dragged on in repeated spots that just were unnecessary. You take two guys like Kofi and Bryan, and honestly you expect a little bit more fluidity out of them, but you really just don't get it, especially when taking into consideration that this is a near main event match for WrestleMania. So before the In Denial Smarks get all upset at this category, we've tried to put over the fact that the spot category entails more than just a don't die Joey Janela stunt, and it doesn't necessarily have to have somebody jumping off a ladder or a cage. This is just a moment where you and your friends look at each other and you just know that's a sick spot. This could be the Ric Flair Michaels spot, this could be the Hell in a Cell spot, this could be any spot where you just have that connection and you just know
That's a good spot.
Those moments are crucial to a match, and this one has them, but they don't really pop the way you'd expect. For example, the only spots that I could really point out would be when Kofi'd go on the top to the outside, or when Kofi would get his retaliation and perform the same uppercuts in the corner or the same face stomp. But other than that, it just fell kind of flat for me.
All that said about not wanting people to die and such, Kofi's bump on the announce table from the top rope was easily the best spot in the match. I don't like seeing people get hurt.
In the arms of the angel.
Well, maybe a little. But that spot alone justifies at least a half star we gave it.
So we've given this a full star, even though the pacing isn't perfect. The overall length felt appropriate given it being a WrestleMania title match. It should be noted that this match was purposely chosen because of the discrepancy we have in length, pacing, and finish categories. We wanted to point out why it's important to show why length and pacing have different conceptual components that don't make them mutually inclusive. If you haven't gathered, you can have a decent length match, but just have horrible pacing that messes everything up. And you can have awesome pacing, but let the crowd down with poorly allocated length. This match succeeds at giving you decent pacing, great subjective length, and simultaneously having pacing affect the overall finish to the match, which we'll get into.
This finish just falls so flat. Maybe it was the position of the match in relation to the rest of the card, or maybe it was in fact the pacing of the match that just didn't build to the glorious ending it deserved. Or maybe the WWE title just doesn't hold the same honor and prestige it once did, but that might be a topic for another video. In any case, once Kofi won, it just felt poorly timed and didn't hit like one would expect.
The right guy definitely goes over here. There's absolutely no reasonable argument against that in my personal opinion. But when the finish of the match happens, it's kind of outscored by the pacing that's its eventual downfall. Like I said, I love Kofi going over here. I love that it's trouble in paradise. I love that we get this moment. But I felt like it didn't hit because of how they executed it. At this point, the ebb and flow, the ups and downs, it started to take its toll. And at the moment I was really most rested, Kofi pulls off the finisher and grabs the title. There was some lagging in terms of timing. Now don't get me wrong, we're going to give this a half star, but it wasn't a brilliant finish for me to give it the full star. The goal here is to set the highest standard for a perfect match. We want to be as smarky as possible.
The only reason this one gets a half star is because of who won it. Kofi had been a journeyman wrestler who was seldom considered more than, at his best, an upper mid-carder with a lot of potential, and at his worst, a good hand that would never be allowed to reach out and grab that brass ring. That being said, this moment just wasn't delivered. Had this not been for a title, this would, in my opinion, just be another decent WrestleMania undercard match. Now, this is a great moment for Kofi and certainly one he earned, but it really just didn't give you the overwhelming sense of wrestling glory that comes with a title win at WrestleMania. I'm not even going to talk about where this run ended up. Seriously, go listen to Bryan Alvarez rant about this. It's gold, and pretty spot on.
Obviously you can't give this no stars, but I'd argue you couldn't give it a full star. If you're good at Steiner math, you can take my 33%, I mean half of one, and I got 0.5, which is what we're going to give this. Look, this one is memorable for one obvious reason, but outside that, it just can't be justified to say it was one of the most memorable matches, and that's where the full star comes into place. If I could break kayfabe for a moment, Meltz might hand this shit out like it's candy, but we have a job, a duty, no, a due diligence to make sure we execute the Steiner math properly and provide a perfect rating. Sorry, got off onto a promo. Not much else to say other than this was a memorable match and it gets a half star. Decent variety here, with a lot of well thought out sequences securing the overall brilliance of its psychology, but outside of its niche, it doesn't go out of its bounds and try new things. Granted, this match has its purpose, and we've stated that 100 times, but I feel anyone could make good arguments for what more it could have done. Overall, this could have better impacted its memorability, spots, pacing. That said, it can't go unnoticed that they absolutely threw down, so it gets a half star.
Ah, the Melt Star. The arbitrary, I mean prophetic, I like it so it gets 5-star star. Between the exchanges of Bryan's insistent knees and kicks to Kofi's resiliency to climb and fight his way to victory, it's a pretty great story. No one could argue it wasn't entertaining, but as with the memorability, there were more options here to explore. Really felt like more could have been done, for example, than have the New Day take out Rowan, stack the cards even more against Kofi, make him truly the underdog of the match, and really send the point home. So that's our whole system. Tell us what you think about it. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and tell us what you think in the comments. This is Corbin and Mike from Smark Thinking.
Now, one could argue, and many will, that all of our categories in this system could fall under this one. Now, our first response to this is...
Fuck you!
Second, we believe...
Fuck you! Come on. You said anals.
It's me. I'm saying it to you.
Oh, come on.
Dude, I said it.
Oh, that's right.
That's right.
That's
You're
right.
like, now who's being unprofessional?
Fucking yeah. Better than